every freelancer's nightmare. You get a client, you do the work, then when it's time to get paid, you hear nothing. Or you do hear from them and they give you a mind-boggling excuse for why they're not going to pay you. It's a hard reality of the world. There are a handful of extremely unethical people out there. People who lie, they cheat, they steal, or they're just so out of touch or entitled that they don't know what they're doing, and they end up ripping off freelancers. Look, if you're in business long enough, you're going to be a victim of one of these people eventually. Chances are a contract won't stop this from happening. And if you're using Upwork or similar freelancing platforms, they only help if you've done everything exactly perfectly and they're legally forced to. So as a freelancer or independent pro, it's up to you to spot the scams before they happen. And that's what I'm going to cover in this video. First, my name is Henry Bingaman. I started freelancing 16 years ago and I was not at all prepared. I quickly went broke, ran up my credit cards, and almost had to quit to find a real job. Then I learned the secrets and strategies that make high-income freelancing possible, and I went on to become one of the highest-paid freelancers in my industry. Today, I make videos like these to help freelancers boost their income and enjoy their work more. All right, there are 3 types of scams that I'm going to cover today. But I want to be clear, there are different levels of intentionality behind each one of these. Sometimes it is a blatant ripoff, and the client is trying to intentionally get you to do unpaid work. These are just bad people. You want to avoid them at all costs. Other times, you're just dealing with a client that doesn't understand freelancers. These aren't necessarily bad people, but they may be bad clients for you right now. So let's dive in. Scam number 1. This is what I call the test project scam. So you're talking to a potential client and they seem to like you, but they're a little nervous about getting into a serious relationship with you. They don't want to do too big of a project right away. So they say, hey, let's just try out a small test project. Now, that alone is not a red flag. In fact, I do it all the time. For example, I may want a 10 email sequence written, and the full project for that would be like $1,500. But I'm considering 3 different freelancers for the job who all have different strengths and weaknesses. Now, it's perfectly reasonable for me to say, hey, I'd like to hire you and 2 other writers to do a test project for me. Then I'm gonna choose the person whose style I like the most for the full project. So, will you write the first email in the sequence for $150? Now, this is perfectly square. You and I both fully understand the terms of the agreement. You know you're doing a small project in the hope of getting a bigger project. But at the same time, you're going to be fairly paid for that one small project you do, no matter what. So in that situation, I'd get the $150 up front, but if there's an escrow involved till after the project's done, that's fine too. So here's where it turns into a scam. Sometimes, especially on the big freelancing platforms, you'll run into a situation where the vendor supposedly doesn't know what they're gonna pay for a project. Now that should already set off some scam alarm bells. Nobody goes into a project without some idea of what it's going to cost and what it's going to return them. When they say, I don't have a budget, it means one of 3 things. It's either, I haven't thought this project through at all, or I know my budget, but there's a chance you'll undercharge, so I'm gonna let you throw out a number that might be smaller, or it could mean I'm gonna take your work and not pay you. Then they ask you to quote an hourly rate. If it's a scam, they're not gonna be able to get away with this if it's a based project fee, so they usually try this on an hourly rate. And here's what they do. Let's say you're on Upwork, not to pick on them specifically, but this is where it happens the most often. The first thing they're gonna do is make big promises of ongoing work. They'll tell you about this insatiable workload and they'll need like 10 of these projects a month. Or if you do a great job, maybe they'll need 20 hours a week from you. Then they'll say, no, but since we don't really know what this project's gonna cost, why don't you just charge me for the hour on the first one? And then, and this is the trick, they put 1 hour's worth of your rate in the escrow fund. So 25, 50 bucks, whatever it is. Obviously, you know it's gonna take you way more than 1 hour to do this project. So when you ask what's up, they're gonna say, oh, well, since we don't know what the final project cost would be, I didn't wanna tie up a lot of company funds in an escrow. So just invoice me for the balance when we're done, and then we'll talk about those other projects. They're always trying to get you to look forward to the next big pot of gold at the end of this project. So their explanation for putting just 1 hour of fee into the escrow seems a little weird, but maybe reasonable, so you start the work. You go back and forth on revisions, you finish the project, and then the first thing they do is immediately release that 1 hour of funds in the escrow. Now, if you're on a platform like Upwork, that transfers the copyright. They now own the material according to the contract in Upwork's terms. After that, though, of course, you haven't been paid yet for the remaining balance. So you send them an invoice, and they disappear. Here's the thing, Upwork does not give a crap about this scam. According to their terms, both parties lived up to their ends of the agreement. You would absolutely win a case if you took the client to court, but you'd be out thousands of dollars and days of your time to win, what, a $1,500 judgment, something like that? It's just not worth it. Plus, the scammer's probably out of the country or broke to start with, so good luck collecting even if you do win some kind of judgment on them. Now, there's only one surefire way to avoid the scam. Get your full fee for a test project upfront or in escrow before you start. This is why I always advocate for charging by the project, not by the hour. Now, project fees sometimes mean you'll make less than you could have because you'll underestimate the amount of work each project will take. But you'll never get ripped off and you'll never fall for this scam if you always have a project-based fee that's agreed upon beforehand. And if you're hourly because of the industry you're in, you can always have the client escrow or pay full for at least a minimum of half the hours you're gonna work before you start. Okay, scam number 2. I call this the terms scam. Look, I've talked about this before, but I almost exclusively rely on agreements, not legal contracts. And the term scam is one of the reasons why. Now, it's important that you have an agreement of the scope of your work, what you're being paid, what's being done, and timelines before you start a project. But unless your projects are in the high 5-figure range or above, contracts are mostly useless. If the person you're dealing with isn't trustworthy, a contract's not going to be the thing that saves you. Now, if you have a lawyer that can fully lay out a contract for each project you do and can explain the terms to you, that is the best thing to do to protect yourself. However, that's just not financially possible for most freelance projects. And here's the thing, if you do get into a contract without having a lawyer actually review it, if you're anything like me, you're not going to fully understand every clause in a 32-page contract that your client wants you to sign. And that's where the scam comes in. Normally, this is kind of a you didn't meet the deadline scam. So they wait until you're 1 minute late with the work, and then they say they're not paying you. But they'll also use the last version of your work, because usually in that contract somewhere, they have the clause that they own the work that's being done no matter what. And of course, it doesn't have to be timelines. It can be some other weird clause that they stuck into a contract on page 12, clause 46B, whatever, where it says you have to use at least 32 commas in this project or we're not paying you. Now, it's not going to be that obvious, but they're going to point out something that obscure as a reason to not pay you. They're intentionally neglecting the spirit of your agreement for some obscure clause buried deep inside so they don't have to pay you. Again, this is the type of thing that happens when you have a contract that you didn't get reviewed by a fully qualified lawyer. And that's why I always just go with simple agreements. I lay out the terms and just start the work, trusting that the client will pay, knowing that I'm actually more likely to get scammed with a full contract than I am with just a simple agreement that we both agree upon. And look, if there's enough money involved that it becomes worth suing them, having that agreement does offer you some layer of protection. It's a document that they signed, they agreed to, and they paid you the first half on. That's legally binding. Now, a good lawyer can squirm out of it, but normally they'll just settle with you if you end up having a project that's worth that much money. All right, scam number 3. And this one is probably the most common of them all, but it's most often done out of ignorance or by accident by the client. But there are definitely clients who understand what they're doing and scam freelancers this way intentionally. This is what I call the project scope scam. Now, you may have heard of scope creep. That's where a project that you thought would be one size ends up gradually getting bigger and bigger over time. This happens when a freelancer hasn't clearly laid out the scope of the project. But it can also happen if the client intentionally hides the true scale of the project from you at the beginning, and then they'll slowly start asking you for more and more work that clearly needs to be done but you didn't expect to do. And frankly, this is something that newer freelancers fall for all the time. But the remedy is also really, really easy. First, just set very clear boundaries on the scope of the project in your initial agreement. So lay out exactly what your deliverables are in as specific of terms as you can manage. Then, when the client tries this scam, or by accident, just politely reply with something like, well, I'd be happy to do that. Would you like me to send you a proposal for expanding this project? Or maybe you don't want to do the work, so just say something like, well, that's outside the scope of this project, and I'd really like to finish up this work before we talk about doing something else. Either one of those replies can work, and most clients will actually understand this, and it won't cause any conflict. But if you're dealing with someone who's trying to exploit you and get free work out of you, they might complain. In fact, they might blow up. They might kill the whole project, which is why it's really important that you get at least a third to half of the project fee up front before you start working with a new client. This just ensures that you don't walk away empty-handed. Now, with some new clients who don't have a track record with freelancers, I actually ask for the entire flat fee up front. And asking for that money up front, maybe this will surprise you, but it makes you look like a pro to the client. It shows that you have confidence and that you lack neediness, because needy freelancers are so scared of losing work that they're way more likely to say, sure, just pay me when the project's done. That's fine. Okay, so those are the 3 most common scams on freelancers. Now, if you like this video, smash that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. And if you know of any scams I missed, tell me about them in the comments. Also, one way to make sure you don't get scammed is to use the right tools, which is why I'd like to give you the 5 free tools that make even brand new freelancers look like seasoned pros. You can get those for free at henrybing.co/free tools. Of course, the link is in the description. All right, catch you in the next one.